So good evening and welcome to our third webinar in our 5-part series brought to you in partnership with YPO Mosaic, YPO Jewish Group, and Tel Aviv University. I'm Adva Oren, Tau Axis Global Leadership Community Manager. We are honored to have you join us for this session where we'll delve into Tel Aviv University Institute for Democracy, a visionary initiative addressing some of the most pressing challenges of our time. It's my pleasure to invite Eyal, representing YPO Mosaic, to share a few words and kick off our tonight discussion. Eyal, please.
Thank you, Adva. Thanks for that introduction. Good evening if you're in Tel Aviv. Good day if you're anywhere else around the world. I'm happy to see some familiar faces. I cannot think of a better time to have Professor Benvenisti talk to us about today's important topic. As you know, many of us, if not all of us, are very well read and following current events. It feels like the whole world is going upside down, turning upside down, right? We've got governments falling in Europe, elections. Obviously, we just had the US election. We have a new president without getting into politics. And even in the state of Israel, while we're fighting this war, many people will tell you from both sides that the government is pursuing various initiatives. Some agree, some don't agree. Even in my home, we have someone wearing this hat and we have someone wearing this hat. And it's as you can see, the whole, I feel that my home here with my wife is a great representation of Israeli society. And I think this is part of this will obviously be discussed by Professor Benvenisti, who I'm proud to have here with us today. Here's a few words about Professor Eyal Benvenisti, co-founder and academic director of Center of Applied Research on Risk to Democracy in Tel Aviv University. Professor Benvenisti is a leading authority on international law, human rights, global governance. Currently, is the co-founder and academic director of the Center for Applied Research on Risk to Democracy at Tel Aviv University. He has held prestigious roles such as Professor of International Law at the University of Cambridge and Director of, I'm going to destroy that word, so you're going to tell us later, Center for International Law. Also, he acted as Consul for Israel in the interim phase of the case brought by South Africa at the ICC. Previously, he was the Annie and Paul Yanovitz Professor of Human Rights at Tel Aviv University and Professor of Law at Hebrew U in Jerusalem. A Yale Law School graduate, he has held visiting professorship at Yale, Harvard, Columbia, and other leading institutions. An award-winning scholar, Professor Benvenisti has authored seminal work like The International Law of Occupation, The Law of Global Governance. His contributions have earned him membership in the Israeli Academy of Science and Humanities and the Institut des Retours, and my wife speaks French, she's not here, cementing his place as one of the most influential voices in international law today. Without further ado, sir, I give you Professor Benvenisti.
Thank you very much for this very kind introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to your to this series of lectures. I want to use this opportunity to talk briefly about the challenges to democracy that I see and the inspiration for the center. So there's that kind of dual task, both to talk about the problem of democracy today, challenges and how to resolve them, and also what we're going to do, what we're planning to do, what we have already started to do in our new center. Let me share the presentation that I prepared for tonight. I hope you can see that.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Wonderful. So, basically, what I'm going to do is to talk about problems of democracy in general, but with application to Israel, which is, as you all know, a deeply divided society in various contexts and various dimensions. and start off with the suggestion that democracy is built on a paradox of trust. So on the one hand, we do not want to trust our leaders. We want to impose on them certain limitations in order to make sure that they do what they are supposed to do for us. So there's kind of healthy skepticism about what they're doing, and for that we need rules of the game to make sure that they follow what we want them to do, what they're supposed to do. And at the same time, we do trust in the institutions themselves, that they function. So we try to on the one hand, based on our initial skepticism about the intention and the ability of our agents to do what we want them to do, we think that we have institutions that are sufficiently effective that enable us to trust them ultimately. Trust them that they will, despite maybe their personal leanings, they will ultimately achieve the common good. And this is what we teach our students. This is the way we refer to democracy when we teach constitutional law or democracy. But then what happens once this basic trust is no longer valid, when certain communities, voters, start to have deep questions about the effectiveness of the system, the ability of the democratic institution actually to make sure that the leaders do what we want them to do, what they're supposed to do, what they promised us to do. And this basic trust is being eroded in several countries. And the democratic institutions set out to ensure trust are deemed by certain communities as part of the problem, not part of the solution. So some groups in society, and certainly true about Israel nowadays, some groups in Israeli society mistrust the political leadership, thinking that the political leadership doesn't represent them and it actually is against them, is tilted against them, whereas other parts of society mistrust the democratic the checks and balances and the what they seem as elite institutions that are not sufficiently attuned to everybody's interests. And this is where we have deep divisions, and we saw it in the year before the October 7th war. We saw the deep divisions and kind of a zero-sum game, those for the court, those against the court, those for the political leadership, those against them, and complete mistrust in the ability of the democratic system to ultimately yield outcomes that are beneficial to most or to all, looking at the common interest as their goal. Now, there are four assumptions of functioning liberal democracy I would like to propose. One is that, and which enables us to trust the system at the outset, kind of theoretically. First of all, there's assumption that voters are committed to liberal, inclusive democracy. There is a demos that everybody is part of in a way. There is an assumption that the democratic process favors the median voters, that the political parties are focusing on influencing those who haven't made up their mind before elections. So if the party is on the left, they will look at people in the center to invite them to vote for them. If the party of the left or on the right would do the same thing, and ultimately those parties will take into account the interest of a larger part of society, and thereby, because they are trying to influence those who have not made up their mind, they would focus on interests that are common to many, if not most, of the voters. And a very important assumption is that the competition among branches of government between the executive and the legislature, and if there's a number of parts to the legislature, and between the central government and the regional government, ambition, as Madison has said, ambition will counteract ambition. We need everybody to agree. There may be veto players on in each branch of government, and they have to come up to agree to something that would represent the interests of many rather than the interests of the few. And finally, there's an assumption that the marketplace of ideas functions and the truth comes out from deliberation and from the exchange of information. And this is why we need freedom of information and all that. We need, also the idea that the sunlight is the best disinfectant. We can get accountability through the functioning of the marketplace of ideas and of the media. And this is what I've been told. This is what I've been telling my students for many, many years. And of course, it's what you read in the literature. But I think that all these assumptions are no longer valid today, or at least they are under serious threat. And this threat needs to be addressed. And we need to think anew about our assumptions and about our ability to make sure that our political agents represent not only our wishes, but also the wishes of everybody else, looking at the common good for all. And this is results from social, political, and technological developments. And here I don't think that I make, and so far I don't think I make any a new insight to the most recent literature. I think there is declining commitment to liberal values in some communities, and to a sense of an inclusive demos that everybody is part of, and it's kind of a collective action among society of the society of the voters. There is no longer a median voter. The median voter doesn't bother to go to the polls. So what party leaders, what political actors need to do is cultivate devoted followers. And for that, for energizing them, for giving them the incentive to go to the polls, they need to polarize them. And they can polarize them because they can communicate directly with them. And this is why checks and balances lose their effectiveness and credibility in two senses. First, they become so to speak, the opposition to the leader who wants to get their views and sees whether a court or another civil servant or governmental agency as an opponent that prevents them from doing what they want. So convincing their voters that the court or the administration or that civil servants are against the people is a way to drive home the point that they need to trust their leaders. And checks and balances become also lose their credibility and effectiveness in another way. Leaders do not need the parties anymore in order to get through to their voters. And they see the party as an impediment to have their own views. There's no more any interest in the members of the party being effective because some leaders don't need them to go around and fetch voters and convince their local voters to take part in elections. Now, if you have a leader that doesn't need the party, they can decide who is going to be the representative of the party in the legislature. And if they can decide who's going to represent the party in the legislature, they can influence the votes of the party representative in the legislature. So, for example, I think now you can see now in the US that if the president can influence the votes of the members of the party in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, it makes little sense that the president need to share power with Congress if their view, the view of the president, is indirectly becomes the view of Congress. And the same thing, even more clearly, is the situation in Israel, where the party leaders, both from the Likud and Yesh Atid and Machaneh Tzioni, all these party leaders are can rule and can decide who is going to represent the party in the next election. So they actually control the votes of their representatives in the Knesset. And therefore, there's no way that the Knesset can effectively check and balance the executive, the government of Israel. Fourth, social platforms amplify misinformation. This we all know. Echo chamber further congeals divisiveness. So the idea that the marketplace of ideas can create a sense of community, what John Stuart Mill thought about, this collective deliberation that creates a society, actually just the opposite happens. Echo chambers create further divisions within parts of society. We see it in Israel quite clearly. There's a declining commitment to liberal values, even commitment to personal agency and rationality among the Orthodox. Ethnic and national divisions are very, very deep, probably as deeper than any time in Israel's history. Politics in Israel promote polarization. Parties are hollowed out. the welfare state has disappeared, and instead we have clientelism. So parties in power allocate funds according to who voted for them. In Israel, there are notoriously weak checks and balances. There is no constitution, a rigid one. The Knesset, in a sense, can do whatever it wants. We have a system of basic laws, but it is the same Knesset that decides which laws are basic and which laws are not basic. And as I mentioned earlier, the Knesset is actually controlled by the ruling coalition. And there's no regulation of social media, and in fact, there is a continuing use of the social media directly by politicians on all parties, there's no attempt to ensure that the media is truthful in any way. So this is the predicament that we are facing, and this is where we start in our center. We address these 4 key challenges. We aim at thinking about ways to increase commitment to democratic values, to reimagine the demos, how to bridge social and identity gaps, how to enhance and rethink checks and balances, and how to ensure democratic resilience amid technological change. This calls for an interdisciplinary effort, and this is exactly what we're doing. We are a university-wide center. We have researchers from all fields, from anthropology, sociology, economics, of course, political science, law, philosophy, and communications, and education. And we are trying to address the problems of democracy as in a comprehensive way, and understanding that the problem is not whether the court will have jurisdiction or will not have jurisdiction, and how judges will be appointed and this way or another. It is a much more complex issue that need to be rethought. So what we're doing in the center is to focus on these 4 challenges, and one of them, as I mentioned, is the inclusive demos. We focus on ways to enhance democratic values through education. We have a team working on why the younger generation is receding, is moving away from democratic values, and how to change this approach. We are trying to think about ways to build bridges within society, within Jewish society, between Sephardi and Ashkenazi, between the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox, and the secular, between the center and the periphery. And we think about ways to identify common understanding and common acceptance of the legitimate national existence of Jews and Arabs in Israel. The goal is to foster mutual recognition and respect between divided groups. Rebuild or build the demos, the Israeli demos. This is challenge 1. Challenge 2 is social gaps. We think based on literature that we find as convincing that income inequality erodes trust in the democratic system and in democratic states among important segments of society. Based on the findings that universal welfare policies foster trust and fairness, whereas selective policies worsen inequality and distrust and create distrust. And the goal here is to promote inclusive social institutions to bridge gap. We have a team that is working on trying to convince decision makers and public that social welfare is an important aspect of rebuilding trust in democratic institutions in Israel. The third challenge, the institutional responses, here we try to think about ways to make sure that the parties regain their importance, to ensure that there are internal democratic procedure within political parties, some kind of a check on the party leader. And there are ways, there are already in a number of countries, there are legislators have identified the problem and have tried to insist on internal democracy within political parties. We think about ways to empower the parliamentary opposition. We think about how to enhance regional and local institutions, how to make sure that there are democratic checks from the periphery on the center. And think about new measures such as referendum or recall elections that would give power back to the voters, at least in some areas. And all of these are ways to rethink the existing checks and balances. And note that we don't focus on the usual suspect, which is court and judicial review, because judicial review has become part of the problem. The judicial review is, of course, remains an important institution, but it cannot be the sole institution that protects democracy. So the goal is to strengthen checks and balances as a way to resist polarization. The fourth challenge, technological impacts. Here we think about the risk of machine learning in governance, the worry that machine learning is a way, or could be a way, to undermine the checks and balances because the reviewers will not understand how the machine works and how the government uses machine learning in order to govern. And then also the fact that the governance through machine learning reduces opportunities for public monitoring, public deliberation. We don't know what the AI is doing, how they decide how to allocate the budgets and so forth. And instead, what we are thinking about is ways to actually use the same machines, machine learning, the same AI tools to promote accountability, to look after what the government is doing, to try to identify through data where money is being spent, on whom, and how decisions affect outcomes. So kind of using AI against AI. Once I have still a draft paper. The title is an AI for an AI. So thinking about trying to catch the bull in the horns and use the same machine learning capabilities in order to promote accountability, of government. And also to use AI in order to monitor social media and to make sure that users get the information as reliable as possible. So I think our insight, or what the insight that animates the center, is that the traditional tools for securing trust in government are insufficient. My personal inspiration is Hans Kelsen, the famous constitutional lawyer, Austrian of Jewish origins, who came up in December 1918 with the idea of a constitutional court as a safeguard for democracy. His proposal was adopted a month later, and his proposal became the model of constitutional courts throughout Europe and throughout the world. Now, that model worked for a century. Now we need to think about additional institutions. We need to think about new tools to protect democracy from modern threats like populism and autocracy, and the new technologies. Our goals are to generate new knowledge about democratic risks, to propose innovative solutions for resilient democracy, and also kind of a meta goal is to study the field of applied research, because our aim is not only to understand the challenge of democracy. Our aim is to act upon our findings and to intervene by offering solutions, by offering proposals for change that we will, if implemented, will follow and make sure that we understand what works, what doesn't work, and refine and propose again. So the idea of applied research may be well known in other fields, but in fields like law, political science, sociology, economy, education is less experience. So our aim is to understand how the field of applied research works, and what works, what doesn't work, how to create the language of interdisciplinary research. This is what we are, these are some of the challenges that we face in our daily work. So in closing, I would say, what I try to share with you is how we see at the center the threats to democracy and our goals and proposed solutions and approach to responding to them. Thank you so much. You're muted, I think.
I was muted. Now it's so. Thank you, Professor Benvenisti. This was super interesting, to say the least. Obviously, I can fill the room or the Zoom call with gazillion questions. Obviously, we've experienced here the last 2 years, putting aside this awful war, a dramatic experience. Living in this country that is so divided, and obviously, as I told you, some people think this way, some people, it's insane how we are indeed so divided on these issues. And I guess I'll ask you one question, and then I'll obviously open it to the floor. Without a rigid constitution or Bill of Rights, what specific reforms or mechanism would you prioritize to enhance the resilience of Israel democracy against this polarization? I'll be curious to hear your thoughts.
Well, to the extent that you focus on legal responses, I think there are a number of tools that we can use. I think our system is so is structured in a way that the winner takes all. The one who gets to control the coalition gets everything except for the court, and this is why the court has become so crucial. But I think we need to take the burden off the court and how to do it. One way is to empower the opposition. I mean, the party, the leading the party that has the highest vote that is not part of the coalition, and ensure by law that that party has the chair of important committees in the Knesset. Now imagine what would have happened if the party in opposition would chair the Committee on Law and Legislation. What would have happened if it had the Committee on Finance or Security? I mean, it will be a completely different Knesset that operates. Another way to think about restructuring checks and balances that some people in our center believe in is to provide more space, more democratic space for regional parts and to municipalities. So local government, empowering local government. Some people even think about restructuring the elections so that there are two houses. One house, the central, like the Knesset now. Another house is composed of members elected in the regions. Another person works who works with us at the center tries to figure out the role of recall elections. Very few countries have this option. In the US, there are some states there's option of recall for the governor. It's a very dangerous, I think, tool, and we need to see what are the pros and cons of using it. So you asked me a question that has several answers to it, and one that might be of interest to those of you who do work with AI and all this. I think here there would be a question about the role of social media and how to regulate them to the extent that it's even possible.
Yep.
But yeah.
Obviously, I have more questions, but I would like to open it to other members. Please unmute yourself if you have questions and go ahead. Anybody? Let me see here. All right, you have there's someone. Go ahead. Okay, so let me ask you another question. Meanwhile, I'll give people some time to think about theirs. Let's talk about the commission of inquiry, right? This is this topic that obviously I think kind of represents the division that we have in this country, even with something so obvious, arguably, for some people at least that after what happened on October 7th, we're going to have some form of a state commission of inquiry, right? That's what we are, part of us demanding. And then you've got another fairly big group of people, some would argue half of this country, who believe that the courts have been politicized and that they cannot trust the court's finding, and they believe that we should nominate a political, a state commission of an inquiry that is led by and made out of people that politician will then, decide on. What's your take on this? Because obviously, look, it sounds really arguably obvious for people who believe what I believe, but then you have millions of people who say no. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question because if the president of the court appoints the committee or the commission, some people say, well, we don't trust the committee. I think that we have experience with commissions of inquiry that were not formally commissions according to the law. Previous governments also had difficulties with formal commissions of inquiries. And I want to mention two commissions. One, the Vinograd Commission after the Second Lebanon War in 2006, and the Turkey Commission after if you remember the flotilla incidents in 2011, I think.
22, yes.
Turkey Commission.
Yeah.
Now, both these commissions were headed by a person who was not appointed by the president of the court. And you know what? It didn't happen. It didn't matter.
Wow.
Because once you are once you head the commission, you have responsibility for eternity. I mean, it's your role. It's your responsibility. It's your place in history. And Vinograd was very effective, and the Turkey Commission was very effective. And once they start asking questions, and once they investigate, and when they call people to give testimonies, they provide the information. The information come out. And this is not an information that you can manipulate through social media. This is information that is kept open, like in a court. And so for me, it doesn't really matter. I think actually what you just asked a question that I think suggests, if I'm correct, that we're wasting time.
Mm-hmm.
If we had agreed on starting commission months ago,
right,
we could have been in the midst of getting the information that we need.
No. Yep. All right, I've got one more question, but I do want other people asking. Please come on, go ahead. This is a fascinating topic. You do not have to live in this country to know what we're experiencing. Anybody else? Oh my God, we're having fun today, Mr. Professor Benvenisti. It's you and I mostly. Oh, Josh, do you want to say something? All right, Mr. Milken. Okay, here's another question for you. President Herzog, a few days ago, possibly a week or more, said that when he sees a real sign that democracy is at risk, he will speak up. He feels that we haven't reached to that point. We haven't reached that point, right? That President Herzog should step up and say, enough is enough. What are these criteria that you would advise the president to say, if you see this and this and this and this, I would suggest that you speak up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that we can start with the basic premise that we can all agree upon, and then go from that. So I think that the basic premise of democracy is that we need free and fair elections open to all. Now, for that, and this is something we can all agree upon, right?
Yeah.
The question is how to make sure that the elections, or actually the next elections, will be free and fair.
Mm-hmm.
How to make sure that the current government doesn't, change or the playing field, tilts the playing field in a way that the next election will not be free and fair. Now, if you see that the media is playing according to the tunes of the government because they have all sorts of incentives and requirements in order to do so, then it might be the case that the next elections are not going to be free and fair. If you think that the agencies or institutions or the commissions are supposed to secure that the elections are free, then also you've reached the point in which democracy is no longer effective. If you see that some of the participants are not able to vote, are not eligible to vote because they are being disqualified without any effective checks on the disqualification, then these are not fair elections. I think so far, I think this would be, for me, this would be this would be the test. I don't think we've reached that point. So I think that the president is correct. What I do think is that what I'm worried about is that when God forbid we've reached this point, it will not be possible to go back. That is my worry. See what I mean? We've not reached this point, but there is on both sides, on all sides, there's so many accusations that you don't trust any decision maker in a moment of real of when the push comes to shove, you need to make a decision. That's the point. Some would not trust the government, some would not trust the court, and it will be you couldn't continue to play the game.
But again, what I find fascinating the last 2 years since Levine got on stage and said what he did, is that you have very smart people on both sides that will tell you that democracy has been taken from them, or that democracy will be taken from them if and when some of those reforms, if you wish, will become a law. Right? I feel that we almost lost our ability to define democracy. Because if you have people from both sides, 50-50, 60-40, it doesn't really matter, who say, oh my God, we're no longer democracy. What's the definition of democracy? And as a follow-up point to what you said, you spoke of democracy in the sense of free elections. But what about minority rights? What about what the Supreme Court, the court here does? Isn't that part of our definition of democracy? And if that's threatened, are we still a democracy?
Yeah. So we can be a democracy with inadequate protection of rights and inadequate, especially inadequate protection of rights of minorities.
Yeah.
Now, I think that this is a real concern, and I think that if you start defining democracy in a thicker way, which you just said, I mean, you moved from the more procedural definition of democracy that I proposed to a more normative definition of democracy, and I think I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. And I'm with you on that in a sense that that both everybody is equal to everybody else, and that people are entitled to their community values, to promote their community values, even if they are not, even if they are distinct from the values of the larger society. So that's obviously another dimension of the problem that we are facing. But what I'm saying is that this is going beyond the procedural to the normative definition of democracy with a liberal democracy with commitment to protecting minorities is a second step. We need first, when we build our home, when we rebuild our home, we need to go to the basement, to start with a basis, and then climb up the stairs to provide a more comprehensive vision of democracy. We are not there yet, unfortunately, because the same core that is threatened is receding in its commitment to minorities, because it cannot, it has no public legitimacy to protect them.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Josh.
So as an American Jew, thank you so much for the time. As an American Jew, I think about my political experience being the separation of church and state, guided by the Constitution and protected by the three branches. It seems as an outsider that Israel is reconciling the inherent conflict that there is not necessarily a separation of church and state, number one, and number two, that not all minorities are created equal. And where you have an Arab population and you have a secular population and you have a religious population. And so is it just a growing pain that we're seeing? And how do we kind of address the now with what you talk about, which is the long tail vision of what we want to become? Meaning, are we just experiencing a moment in time, right? And this is just a natural evolution, because the religious community, weren't they a minority? And now they're having a disproportionate voting bloc. So it speaks to the definition, I guess, your original point definition of democracy.
Yeah.
Really a question, more a statement, but you know.
Yeah, and also the definition of the demos. Who are we as a society? I mean, and how can we reconcile the different conception of the good, right? And different visions of how the state is going to can manage its affairs. Now,
it would seem, what I'm getting at is, it would seem that this is a natural conflict or friction point in the maturity of the state of Israel, which is the inability to separate the church from the state, the proverbial, right? And that's the issue of the day, it would appear.
You see, one of the problems that we're facing today is the challenge of enlisting the ultra-Orthodox to the army. So that's a situation where the secular state, if you will, to looking in it this way, the secular state is seeking to impose its demands on a large community that views that demand as completely illegitimate. You know, the problems that maybe you're alluding to, problems like whether I am entitled to marry according to civil law rather than to religious law. These are issues that I think are not pressing at the moment because we have more immediate issues to face. These are issues maybe we have to defer them to the future. I don't think we worry too much about, the ability to drive on Shabbat or to open to go to the cinema. These are also matters that are no longer public. There is this issue of public transportation on Saturday. I agree, this is an issue. But again, I don't think that is an issue that defines us as a democracy or not democracy. We are facing much more challenging and threats to our ability to decide together, to see ourselves as having the same future, the same sense of community. The lack of trust is even in a personal level. It percolates from the leadership to the street. I've been driving in Israeli motorways, and I'm telling you, it's very difficult. The sense of rivalry, you can see it there as well. I mean, we are in a deep societal crisis that is fueled by this opposing viewpoints and opposing senses of who we are, and we need to approach that. So it's not only a matter of who appoints judges to the Supreme Court. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Right. The 90% of the iceberg are below our regular discourse, and we at the center, we are aiming at the 90% that is below sea level. This is where the solution will have to come from.
Professor Benvenisti, I would like to thank you. Obviously, we could talk about this for many nights and days and weeks. As I said at the beginning, we could not find a better time to have this conversation. And if I ever go for my PhD, it's thanks to you and tonight that piqued my curiosity. So thank you all who attended today. This thing will be recorded and obviously will be shared in our WhatsApp groups. Thank you, Dr. Benvenisti, and to the Center at Tel Aviv University. I appreciate it. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.